Welcome to the Year-End Payroll 2020 webinar.
Yes, hi, good morning. This is Mike Weller with Costerisan, and it's time again for our annual year-end payroll discussion and talk about the wonderful time that we have coming up in the month of January in filing the year-end payroll tax returns and to look forward into 2021 on some of the possible changes coming up and things you need to know. 2020 has definitely been a challenging year for all of us, and a lot of changes, a lot of challenges, working virtually, working from home offices, and so that creates some things in payroll. If you're used to work in the city and now you're not working in the city, there's some payroll tax changes there to think about, and so yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we'll go through some of these, and I'll highlight some things in my packet that I've kind of put together as mostly a reference tool, kind of show you the forms that were updated and some of the things to think about as you process the quarterly and annual payroll tax returns in W-2s and here in January, especially 1099s this year. So we'll start on our first page on the year-end checklist. Just a reminder to look at your holiday processing schedule for Christmas and New Year's this year. Figure out when you need to have payroll processed so that whatever system you're using, you have time to get the funds transferred and the payroll processed and into your employees' bank accounts when they're expecting that. Need to identify the last payroll of the current year, the first payroll of the new year, to determine when tax tables need to be updated and when you need to make your salary adjustments or benefit deduction adjustments or things like that. So make sure you identify when your last payroll is and your first payroll is in the new year. It's important to know when the last payroll is, so if you have any year-end payroll tax adjustments that you need to make for group term life insurance, personal use company cars, hospital education assistance, any year-to-date corrections that need to be made, any manual payroll checks that have been written that need to be entered into the payroll system and recorded, any third-party sick pay recording to think about. So think about those items and make sure those are entered into the payroll. If there's any Social Security, Medicare taxes that need to be withheld from the employee's pay for these items to record, make sure that happens as well. Also, if you have health savings accounts, the employer health savings account contributions need to be reported on W-2 as well. And so remember that item. Make sure that you've ordered your forms. I've had our forms for several weeks now, and there seems to be challenges with shipping right now with all the online Christmas shopping and shipping. So and also with COVID vaccine that's being shipped around. So there's a lot of capacity issues with shipping. So if you haven't ordered forms yet, it's gonna be a little bit of a tight window to get those, but you need to get those ordered as quick as possible. Just remember that we have a new 1099 NEC form, the 1099 non-employee compensation form, which is brand new for 2020. And you're going to need to make sure that you've ordered that form. That used to be what was entered on the 1099 miscellaneous box 7 for your independent contractors that you're reporting that have earned $600 or more. So that now goes on 1099 NEC, and we'll talk more about that later. But I just want to mention that now with ordering forms to make sure that you might possibly need to order 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC. So that's definitely very new for 2020. Also, if you need to notify employees of any change to their W-4 status, now is a good time to do that, especially if they need to maintain their exempt status. They'll need to file a new W-4 form. So it's always good to have employees, if they need to update their W-4s, to remind them to do that at this time. Okay, so make sure you have enough postage, or are you delivering your W-2s, and just schedule a time to possibly do a preliminary print of your W-2s, and make sure things are going to be printed out properly on W-2s and 1099s if you need to do that. Okay, over on page 2, I wanted to bring to your attention the state minimum wage. The state minimum wage, it just came out a couple of days ago. It was scheduled to increase to $9.87 for the state of Michigan. So as of 1/1/2021, they've had these increases. Currently, the the state minimum wage for Michigan is $9.65, and they have delayed the increase for 2021. So it will not increase to $9.87. It will stay at the $9.65. So make sure you take a note of that. The delay is because of the COVID-19 issue, and they have to make sure that the annual unemployment rate for the preceding calendar year falls below 8.5% before that is adjusted. So right now, the minimum wage rate is going to stay at $9.65 for right now. Just a reminder for the Healthcare Act, that still is in effect, and where if you have over 250 W-2s that you file, you need to report the cost of coverage for your employer group health plan expenses, and that needs to go in box 12, code DD. So that is still a reporting requirement. There really isn't any issues with that, but that just needs to be reported if you have more than 250 W-2s. The tax filing deadline, of course, as we know, has all been moved up to January 31st. For the 2021 filing deadline, we actually have an extra day to file returns. So because the 31st falls on Sunday, February 1st will be the due date of W-2s and 1099 forms. So, of course, the W-2s and W-3s need to be filed to the employees and to the Social Security Administration by February 1st. The Form 1099 NEC, both the recipient copy and the copy to the IRS need to be filed by January 31st. And then the 1099 miscellaneous forms, of course, the recipient copy would need to be filed by February 1st to the recipient, but then the government copy will be is allowed to be filed later. But you can file it all at the same time and just be done with that. So the other issue that we keep talking about is the truncated Social Security numbers on W-2 forms. Currently, the truncation, they are allowing the truncation to happen on the employee copies, but you cannot truncate the Social Security number on the federal government copy. So it's probably best just not to truncate the Social Security number on W-2 forms, but they are allowing it on the employee copy currently for 2022. Okay, on page 3 is our annual changes. Our annual changes to the Social Security wage base. That will increase in 2021 to be $142,800. So that's an increase there of $5,000 For the for 2021, you want to make sure on your W-2s that the limit is $137,700. There has been no changes to the Medicare tax rate, and that's still 1.45% for unlimited. And of course, any employee that earns wages over $200,000, they have the employee amount of additional 0.9% that needs to be deducted from the employee's pay. There is not a employer match on that 0.9%. The 401k, 403b amounts, those are going to stay the same. So for 2020, 19,500 with a catch up when you're age 50 or over of 6,500, and that's going to stay exactly the same for 2021. There are no increases there. Similarly, on the 408 simple plans for 2020, it's $13,500 with a catch up of $3,000. Again, that stays the same for 2021 as we move forward, so no change there. The automobile rates you can see are for 2020. We do not have the automobile rates yet for personal use of auto for 2021 yet. So when those are announced, there's a spot there that you can fill those in. Okay, on page 4, again, as you know, are just the phone numbers for information and for important websites that many of you already know about. So I won't go through those, but that's just a page again for your reference to the different websites. That there's a lot of helpful information that's available out there. Page 5 is a reminder of publication 15. Publication 15 is where you can find a lot of information out there about who are employees. What is the definition of an employee? What's the definition of supplemental wages? And how are supplemental wages taxed? So a very helpful section. Section of depositing taxes. What are the due date of payroll tax deposits and how to avoid penalties in getting those filed? So that section is very helpful. And then there's special rules for various types of services and tax payments. So when you make certain payments, there's a chart on page 39 in section 15 of the publication that talks about how different payments and wages or different things are taxed and how those should show up on the W-2 form. So that, again, it's a very helpful publication to review. Talks about the redesigned Form W-4 and gives you some hints there on that, as well as the new Form 1099 NEC. But we'll talk more about, again, those items later because they have their own instructions and things. So now we'll just go over to page 7. And again, just a reminder to look at publication 15A, and that's been updated. And 15A talks about who are employee and independent contractors. That's a very important section. IRS is really focusing on trying to move as many independent contractors as they can to employee status, because they need to collect the taxes, payroll taxes. So it's a lot easier to collect payroll taxes than it is to collect the self-employment taxes from independent contractors. So you really need to make sure that you understand the definition of what an independent contractor is. It's extremely very helpful to have a contract, a signed contract on file explaining the relationship you have with a contractor. That will typically help when there's any kind of Department of Labor audits, unemployment audits, or IRS audits in these cases. Also, the publication 15A talks about exempt organizations, nonprofit organizations, and employees in those situations. Talks about sick pay reporting, and also has a section that talks about the pension plans and information. So publication 15A is, again, very helpful. and you might want to review that for any situations that you have in your organization. On page 8 is publication 15B. Publication 15B talks about the employer's tax guide to fringe benefits. And some fringe benefits that are common are really dependent care assistance, group term life insurance coverage, health savings accounts, and of course the personal use of vehicle or cents per mile rule, commuting rules in paying staff for use of their vehicle and how all that gets reported. So those are the common ones, but again, publication 15B, very helpful publication for fringe benefits and how to report those. Okay, again, moving expense reimbursements. I know we keep talking about that. Moving expense reimbursements are only for members of the U.S. Armed Forces. So that's the only time that you really can use that. So that's another item to watch out for if you had moving expense reimbursements in prior years. The last couple of years, it's only been allowed for the U.S. Armed Forces. Okay. On page 10 and 11, there are just a couple of examples of reconciliation forms. Page 11 is the form that we use in our department to put together, and it's the opportunity to take your 4 quarters of your 941 returns and to list out and get a total for the year, and that allows you to add up the total and make sure those totals match up with numbers on your W-2 forms. That way, you do not get a notice 3 years from now saying that the numbers on your 941 returns do not match the numbers on your W-2s, and now you've got to dig out all your payroll records and figure out what the problem is. You probably have to update this form. You have to modify this form this year because of all the additional changes due to the CARES Act or the Families First and all the different payroll tax situations that you've gotten a credit for, or you haven't had to pay the employer side of Social Security taxes. And so that creates a challenge this year in how we reconcile our information, because we are going to have some situations where that employer matching amount for Social Security taxes, for example, is not there. And so we're going to have to identify that to make sure that our numbers are reconciling, and that we understand why they might not reconcile this year. And we'll talk more about that as we go along in this hour. But this form is very helpful in putting information from your 941, your unemployment tax returns, your federal unemployment tax information, and just making sure that it all reconciles and your state wages and your city wages all match. It's so very important to make sure that that information is reconciled and being reported properly. On page 12 is just a summary discussing the reporting and taxation of fringe benefits. One thing that I always want to remind people is to consider to have a benefit year for your fringe benefits that might end October 31st or might end October 30th. That way, for example, you can get your automobile personal use mileage in by November 30. That way you can calculate the amount that you need to add to the W-2 and include that in your December payroll. And then that way, then, you're not waiting until the end of December 31st and trying to back that in and enter that into your payroll and get taxes paid on that number. So, you need to consider to have a fringe benefit tax year for some of those fringe benefit items to end in November, to give your employees time to get you that information to calculate the amount of fringe benefit to report in your payroll system in W-2. You can include the benefit with the employee's regular wages and tax with their calculation there when you're calculating the payroll, or you can use the supplemental payroll rates. And currently the federal rate is at 22%, and the state of Michigan supplemental rate is at 4.25%. So there's been no change there for those tax rates, but you need to report those friends benefits on the W-2. Okay. The next page, page 13, is the chart to talk about the group term life insurance premium rates. Again, this table is the cost per $1,000 of protection for 1 month. And so however you do it, some organizations, employers do this on a payroll basis, every pay period. Some do it on a monthly basis. Some do it on an annual basis. So if you do it on an annual basis, you'll need to multiply the number you come up with by 12 to come up with the annual amount. But this table is based on age. So if as you go through, employees are going to get older. So you might need to move employees to a different tax bracket, or age bracket, to get a new cost number. And again, currently, this is still regarding group term life insurance in excess of $50,000. So you'll determine what group term life insurance amount in excess of $50,000 and calculate the amount that you need to report on the W-2, and you will report that, and it'll show up in box 12, code C on the W-2, and that will need to be yes, that will need to be reported. So the age is calculated as the age of the person as of December 31st. So whatever the person's age as of December 31st would be the age bracket that you would use. The next page is 14, 15, 16 really is just talks about the verification of employee Social Security numbers. So there's a Social Security number verification service that you can use to verify Social Security numbers. It's important to have the correct name and Social Security number match up on that. The IRS is continuing to increase penalties, and they're looking for a way to increase revenue. And so they're really they're not willing to be as forgiving on the penalties. And so we want to make sure that the correct name and Social Security number information is reported on the W-2. So this is information on how you can use the verification service to help verify the information that you're reporting. Also on page 16 talks about the AccuWage program, and that's been moved to an online program, and that can be used. So if you file your W-2s electronically to the Social Security Administration, it is recommended to use AccuWage program just to test your file to make sure that it's going to be accepted properly by the Social Security Administration. It just helps you know that, yep, the information is in the right format for the Social Security Administration to accept that. So again, that is on page 16 for your information. On page 17 is again just a reminder about the Form W-4. You do need to remind employees that if they want to update their W-4 form, they're allowed to do that. And then if they're claiming exempt status, they will have to update a new W-4 form by February 15th, 2021 to maintain their exempt status. An employee cannot decide that they just want to be exempt. They have to really fit within that the previous year they didn't have any tax liability, and they don't anticipate on having any tax liability in the current year. So you can't just decide, oh, I'm exempt from taxes. You have to have a valid reason that you're exempt from having taxes withheld. If employees aren't having enough tax withheld, IRS can send the employer a notice letter and require that a certain level of withholding be done on employees' pay. So just watch for that, but make sure the W4 forms continue to be complicated. There are online tools that employees can use. It's the employee's responsibility to look at their paycheck stub, each payroll, and determine, is this correct? So just a reminder there, as we get to near year end, 2021 is going to be a challenging year, is what I'm sensing, when employees are filing their tax return, especially if part of the year they've been on unemployment. Unemployment, that they've received is taxable, and typically there aren't any tax withholdings done when that unemployment is claimed. So there's a possibility that employees will have some tax due, and so it's going to be one of those 2020 was, there's a lot of this government assistance that were helping people out, well deserved, and needed to happen. But then 2021 will be the year that the government's going to try and recapture some of that money to help pay the expenses of the government. So W4 is going to be very important, and keep an eye on that. The next pages are the 18 to 21 is the W4 form. I know that there are still some software programs that have two different tax calculations. You've got a checkbox that marks use the new W4 to calculate payroll, and then there's another checkbox that says still use the previous method prior to the new W4 form. So keep an eye on that. But again, the employee really needs to take ownership of the calculation of the taxes being withheld. And I hope that eventually, somewhere online, they can simplify this or make this, but it is a very complicated situation now with this W4 form. Okay, the page 22 is, again, just a reminder, have a Michigan W4 form on file if you're in the state of Michigan, or if you have other employees in other states, you need to have that state's W4 form on file. And again, it's instructions from the employee on how to withhold taxes for those states. Also, if you're in a city that has city tax, then you also need to make sure that you've got a W4 on file for that city tax. On page 23 is my annual conversation about Form I-9, which is to the employment eligibility verification form, to make sure that the employee that you're hiring is eligible to work in the United States. They have the proper documents. And the discussion each year is about the expiration date of this form. They have finally just updated the expiration date. Previous expiration date was August 31st, 2019. And we know that that had been expired, and we were using expired forms for the remaining part of 19 and into 2020. Currently now they have released this form, and it's been updated, so now it expires October 31st, 2022. So I just think it's somebody's full-time job out there to keep that data updated. So I haven't noticed that there's been any changes in the documents that have been required. There's just a few minor word changes in the form, but again, you don't have to go back and update any previous I-9 forms that you have on file, but going forward now, any new employee that you hire, you have to use this new current form that has the expiration date of 2022 on it. So you want to make sure that you have these on file so that if Homeland Security comes in and wants to look at these forms, then you have these forms available that show that the employee is eligible to work in your organization. And that's through pages 25. So, and 25 is a list of all the acceptable documents that are allowed to verify the eligibility for the employee to work. Okay, on page 26 is the W-9 form. The W-9 form is the information, the identification, the request for taxpayer identification number. And so that's to get the name of the information you need for independent contractors or attorneys, you know, or to determine whether the entity is a you know, a corporation or not a corporation. So you determine whether or not you need to issue a 1099. It's very, very important to have these W-9s on file. I was just recently involved in a helping a client through an IRS audit, and having a W-9 on file helps reduce the penalties if a 1099 miscellaneous might have been not filed, you know, was missed or something. But if we have a W-9 on file, a tax verification number, and we, you know, obtain that information, it's extremely helpful to avoid penalties and to also to make sure that you do have the correct information and you don't get these mismatched notices later down the road saying that the name and the tax verification number does not match. So W-9 form is very important in making sure information is correct and that tax penalties, if you're audited, are minimized. So have those on file. On page 27 is the Form 941. As many of you are aware, the 941 has been updated 3 times this year in 2020. First quarter has a specific 941. Second quarter has a specific 941. So that's why in the top upper right-hand corner of the form, it's very important to notice whether the form has shaded boxes in it or not, to know whether you're using the correct form for the correct quarter. And so, you know, make sure that those have been filed correctly that way. They're on the 941 form on the first page, of course, we know that there's in lines 5A and on line 5A, there's been the place to mark for the to enter the wages in for qualified sick leave wages and qualified family leave wages, because those wages were not subject to the employer matching taxes for Social Security. And so that's why they had to put those in differently. So, and there's also been other additions to the 941 form with the deferred amount of Social Security tax on, you know, on page 28, and the other payroll tax credits that were being allowed for the employee retention credits, if you had that involved, and the other tax deferrals that were allowed for employee portions and things. So quite a bit of changes on the Form 941. I'm expecting that in 2021 is going to be the year of quite a few 941 notices, I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess there's going to be a lot of 941Xs being prepared. I know that the IRS service centers, because of COVID, have the workforce has been decreased and they've been sent to work from home offices. IRS service centers have been partially shut down, if not totally shut down at times during 2020. I know that there are millions of pieces of unopened mail that are sitting on people's desks. And I know that, you know, notice that the computer has been sending out notices, but the mail has been slow in delivering them. And a lot of employers are getting notices that are after the due date to respond. And so there's a lot of these issues going on. So really look at the instructions, try and understand all these different credits that have happened. Keep track of any deferral of taxes, like the deferral of payroll taxes that you might have made, if that's you, and now you've got to pay half of that by December 31st, 2021, and the other half by December 31st, 2022, that those aren't forgotten, because it's all about minimizing the penalties and making sure that all these different changes have been followed. The form, of course, has been expanded in the number of pages because of the different tax credits and stimulus programs, and so there has been extra pages added to that. And so I'm not going to go through in detail on that. The instructions are there. We filed third quarter already with a lot of these changes, and a lot of these programs do end December 31st. And so we already have been processing payroll using a lot of, or dealing with a lot of these issues. It's very, on page 31, it's talking about the Schedule B form. So very, very important that Schedule B tax liability does tie back to to page 2. I was looking for that. For line 12. On line 12. So on page 2 of the 941, on line 12, so the total tax liability there that's calculated, that amount really needs to match Schedule B. And so make sure that Schedule B is filled in. Schedule B is filled in on your payroll tax, or on your payroll date. So your payroll check date is when the tax liability needs to be filled in on the payroll forms. It should match when you're making your payroll tax deposits. And so you want to really make sure to minimize penalties that happens, and you do that that matching and make sure that the tax liabilities do match your tax payments, and there's no problems there. Okay, on page 32 is the 941X. The 941X is becoming more and more complicated due to the fact that there's been so many changes to Form 941. And so you can, this form is used to correct Form 941. And again, like I said, you're the advanced class, so typically you're not filing a lot of 941Xs. But as you can see on page 33, on page 2 of the 941X, there are a lot more lines added on here, or the different lines that have been added to Form 941. A lot of different tax rates, a lot of different other previous years that certain lines were on the 941 form and such. So each time the 941 form adds a new line, the 941X is going to have to add another line or a spot. So it's becoming very complicated, and they've added a whole another page for all the the different qualified health plan expenses and reporting, and health plan, the wages and employee retention credits, and just everything that we've been dealing with and learning about in payroll. My hats go off to you guys, and just be encouraged, one day at a time, and we will soon pass through this. But yeah, it's been a lot of changes going on. One of the key things about the 941X is on page 35, which is the third page, is the explanation, a detailed explanation of your corrections. And I don't know, but this is the only time that I've ever gotten a 941X returned back to me, is because the explanation did not give enough details in the proper way. So really look at the example in the instructions of 941X on what that detailed explanation looks like. It's going to be a complicated, detailed written explanation because of all the boxes that are involved in explaining your corrections. So, but it is an important part of the form, and just wanted to highlight that for you. On page 37 is the W-2. W-2 form has not been any changes on the W-2 form. In previous years, box 9, which as you can see is now shaded, that was used for a verification code to help prevent some fraud going on. But since last year, 2019, and now 2020, that program has been set aside, and so they're not using box 9 anymore for that program. A couple reminders on this is that you want to make sure that your taxable wages, your taxable federal wages in box 1 is equal to your state wages in box 16, as well as if you have local wages in box 18. So if they don't match, you want to understand why those don't match. So those are your taxable wages, federal, state, and city taxable wages. If you have multiple states, your multiple state wages, or if a state does not have state wages, state taxable wages, then that might be a reason why your state wages do not match your federal wages in box 1. But take a moment and just understand the relationship of those boxes to each other. You know, if you have employees that are over the Social Security wage limit, then your box 3 will possibly not match your box 1. If you have 401k plan, for example, your 401k plan is not taxable for federal taxes, state or city, and so your 401k will not be included in box 1, but it will be taxable for box 3 and 5, and so that might be a difference. If you have a cafeteria plan, again, those are, you know, that will not be taxable, and those wages will not show up in boxes 1, 3, 5, 16, and 18. So think about those differences on your W-2, understand what some of the reconciliation issues are, and to help make sure the information is correct and flowing properly from your payroll. The other box I wanted to highlight was the retirement plan box. There in box 13, there in the middle. So if you have employees that are active in a retirement plan, you need to make sure that that box is marked. You know, it's easy to tell if they're deferring taxes or deferring retirement plan funds. That'll show up in box 12 right next to there. But if they are not deferring and they're only receiving an employer 401k deduction, for example, or contribution, 401k contribution, then they're still active in the retirement plan. So on the next page, on page 38, I do have that retirement plan checkbox decision chart for you, as well as the on the top, I've got the box 12 codes that you would use on Form W-2. So both of these charts are very helpful for you to make sure the information is recorded on the W-2 correctly. The box 12 codes on the top here, some of the familiar ones that you would use would be code C for group term life insurance, code D for your 401ks, code E for your 403B plans, code S for your 408 simple plans, code W for your employer contributions for your health savings accounts, and code DD for your employer-sponsored health coverage that you're required if you have more than 250 employees to report. And the new code FF, new last year, if you're doing the qualified small employer health reimbursement arrangement plan that's out there. So those are some of the key items to think about and to make sure are reporting in box 12 on the W-2 form. The next page is 39, and that is the form W-3. Again, W-3 is your transmittal form for your W-2s, and it's just the total form. Again, we have an extra day to file W-2s now. The due date is February 1st, 2021. So we'll take every day that we can get, but this is your transmittal form for the W-2s. The next form is page 40, and that's your third-party sick pay recap form. So if you have employees that are being paid disability insurance, or yes, so and you have a shared responsibility, I recommend that employers try and have the disability insurance company pay the employee and employer shares of the taxes, Social Security and Medicare taxes. But if you have a shared responsibility, then you have this third-party sick pay recap form that is needed so that the IRS can reconcile the Social Security amounts paid by the disability insurance company and then the employer. So this is the form that's used for that. Look at the instructions again, look at the publication that I talked about earlier and how this is filled out and sent in if you have third-party sick pay that you need to report on your W-2s and you need to do the third-party sick pay recap reconciliation form. Page 41 is a reminder about the 1099 miscellaneous form. Guys, people, and if you're in accounts payable and 1099 miscellaneous is your responsibility this year, I'm sorry. It's going to be a challenging year because, yes, IRS moved from the 1099 miscellaneous income box 7, which is a non-employee compensation box. They moved that to the new form 1099 NEC. But what did they also do on form 1099 miscellaneous? They rearranged the boxes. And so your software program, you're gonna have to look at that. You're gonna have to look at your vendor files. You're gonna have to look at your transaction files. I don't know, what that looks like. Some software vendors have been able to put in there a program that was able to rearrange the boxes in your transactions, the box codes or whatever, to get them to go to the right place. But as you can see, that box 7, that used to be for employee, non-employee compensation, not your independent contractors, but that used to be box 7 used to be box 9. Box 9, that used to be box 10 before. Box 10 used to be box 14. And so, and that deals with the amounts that you need to pay to the attorney. And, so that, what's going to happen now with you make payments to law firms or to attorneys, that they have to receive a 1099, whether they're a corporation or they're not a corporation. They're not exempt from that. All attorney fees, all legal settlements need to have a 1099 reported. And so what's going to happen is that the attorney fees, or if you can separate out attorney fees for services, that used to go in box 7 on your miscellaneous 1099. Your attorney fees now have to go in box 1 on the 1099 NEC. Now, if you cannot separate out attorney fees, then you need to then put the attorney fees and the settlement fees all in box 10 on your 1099 miscellaneous. And that all used to be box 14 in previous years, but that is now box 10. So there's been some shifting and there's been some movement in these boxes from box 7 on down. And so that's going to be very, very important that you have to look into your computer software, look into how you have things coded, and you have to look to see how things are being printed on your Form 1099 miscellaneous now. And then on the new form, which is the next page, on page 42, which is your non-employee compensation form. And so basically, all that's being reported on this form, you know, again, is box 1, non-employee compensation, attorney fees, you can separate those out. So amounts that are $600 or more, if you had any federal income tax withheld, that goes in box 4. If you had any state tax withheld, that goes in box 5. So the new form, 1099 NEC, fairly simple. Not much goes on it. Again, it's due to the recipient by February 1st this year, due to the IRS by February 1st this year. Very important to get that form filed on time and to make sure that all the amounts are going to the correct boxes. So again, I'm sorry that change is going on. I think it's going to take some effort to get things reported in the right place, but hopefully during the year. I tried to mention that in our last conversation that we had last year. And so hopefully during the year, you've all done this in pre-advance and it won't be a challenge to get these forms filed. The next page, page 43, is Form 1096. Again, this is a transmittal form for your 1099s, and it should have a new box on there for 1099 NEC to mark and file. So it's your transmittal form for all your different 1099 interests, dividends, you name it. This is the form you use to send in your form to the IRS, your 1099 forms to the IRS. The next page on 44, just a reminder about the Form W-2G. A lot of nonprofits have some fundraising things going on, raffles, wagers, etc. And so Form W-2G is to report those certain gambling winnings that you might need to report. Occasionally I have clients that ask about that, so just a reminder for that situation. The next section is just a reminder about the state of Michigan unemployment forms. These forms, again, we've had to file electronically for many previous years, so that's not an issue. There hasn't been a lot of changes to this form. The obligation assessment has gone away, so that's saving employers money. The unemployment benefits that your employees claimed for 2020 should not go on should not go into the calculation of your unemployment tax rate, is my understanding. So just watch for that when your unemployment tax rate comes out here in the next 10 days or so. Check your unemployment tax rate and make sure that makes sense. There's been a lot of fraud in the Michigan unemployment benefits coming out, so it's important that any letters that employees get or employers get, that you're looking at that information and you're notifying unemployment of any incorrect information or of fraudulent claims that are going on. I think Michigan is one of the higher states that's having fraud going on, and it's very targeted fraud by crime groups that are from other states or possibly even countries. So it's just fascinating what's going on there, but it's a problem. It's a very challenge to get unemployment benefits to the employees that are out of work and deserve that, need to pay their rent and buy food. So we'll continue to work through that, but those are the major issues there. Starting on page 48, again, I'm not going to go through these documents, but I did want to put in here a section from the IRS website to just provide you with this information about, the employee retention credit, for example, the issues. And like I said, a lot of these credits that we've been able to flow through on Form 941 and reduce our tax, your payroll tax payments. A lot of these, you know, are going to be expiring December 31st. And so, you know, we've already been doing this, and so you just have a short period of time that these are in effect. And so it basically just gives you some information that you can refer to, but I'm certain that many of you have already been doing this. You know, the paid sick and family leave credit is has been out there, and that sick and family leave credit deals with sick, quarantine, or experiencing COVID symptoms, and then you've got the family medical leave part of it, where the employee is unable to work because of a child care situation, or having to take care of family members. So look at those credits, look at those opportunities. There's been a holdup of processing of the Form 7200, the advanced payment of employer credits. Again, IRS service centers are just behind. And so trying to process those advanced credits, trying to process these forms, there are just issues going on. Deferral of, on page 52, deferral of employment tax deposits. Again, you want to keep track of these. I know it's going to be hard. You got to remember that, you know, you've got these payments that you've deferred. You've got these payments that are going to be coming due, and so you're going to have to keep track of that, and to minimize any penalties regarding that. I did want to mention on these on the wages that you pay through the paid sick and family leave credit. Those wages, you know, they're not going to have the employer Social Security taxes show up on the W-2 form. Again, we talked about that briefly, but those wages are also going to have to show up on box 14 on the W-2, and so so that's where they need to show up at. Or if they don't show up in box 14, then you have to have some other kind of notification on what the amount of the paid sick and family leave wages were that were paid for that employee. As I understand, there might have to be some reporting on the 1040 return or something. But anyways, that amount needs to be given to the employee, the amount that was paid for sick and family leave credit wages. Okay. And then the other thought, as I'm thinking about this, I know that in you know, middle of September and through the end of the year was the opportunity for employees to defer their Social Security taxes. And you know, you know, and then that deferral, then in beginning of 2021, January 1st through April, the employee wouldn't have to pay that back. And yeah, I thought about that, and I think I discouraged many of my clients and others not to do that. It seems like it put a big burden on the employee at the beginning of 2021 to have basically, you know, double Social Security taxes withheld and pay that back. But it also puts a burden on the employer, because if the employee did not work there anymore, now it's the employer's responsibility to pay back those taxes. The other issue is that you're going to have to, on the W-2 form, now I know that if you receive federal dollars in any way, or you were a federal employer, you were required to do this. So I'm sorry, but that was the case. But on the W-2 form, you have to show, even though the employee share of Social Security taxes were deferred, you have to show the Social Security wages as paid on the W-2 form. The Social Security taxes withheld is not going to show up in box 14. Now, when the employee pays back and has withheld the 2020 share of those Social Security taxes, you now, as the employer, you have to do a W-2C for 2020 at the end of April and report that amount of Social Security taxes that the employee had withheld on their 2021 payroll. You have to report that only in box, only in the tax box on the W-2 form. You won't report any Social Security wages with that. You'll just report the taxes withheld on a W-2C. And so that will make some additional filing requirements and again, reconciling nightmares to as the government IRS tries to determine whether or not the correct amount of Social Security taxes has been withheld between 2020 and 2021. So just think through that process and there will be more information, I'm sure, regarding that. But yeah, there will be some challenges there. And of course, lots of additional tax work for IRS and notices and all fun stuff like that. On page 57, again, I'm not going to go through these because I don't want to keep you from lunch. But you know, just talks about, I put the section in here that talks about the depositing taxes. You've got a look back period in depositing payroll taxes. And so on page 58, make sure you look at the look back period calendar and prepare for your 21 withholding tax schedule to make sure that either you're a monthly, you're a semi-tax depositor, or if you're 100,000 or more, you're the next day deposit obligation. So take a look at that section. That's just for your information. But again, like I'm saying, you know, IRS is doing a lot with penalties, and it's taking a lot of extra effort because they are difficult to get a hold of, and their processing time has increased quite a bit to resolve some of these penalty notices. So that takes you through that section. And then on page 64 is just a special rules for various types of payments made. Talks about your cafeteria plan amounts, talks about your fringe benefit reporting and taxing household employees. If people have that situation, you know, the retirement and pension plan amount or recording and reporting what's exempt and what's taxable on page 67. And, you know, students and those issues that you might have if you employ students and you have the tax treaties that you need to deal with and discussion. And so those charts, they're all available in publication 15. But again, I just put these charts in there for your reference information and so that, yeah, so that you refer to that. So again, that was our hour always disappears very quickly, but that's what I had to discuss. I do wish everybody a you know, very good year end and just a good start and transition to 2021 as we move forward. All right, so I think we'll wrap this up then, and thank you.